Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this week's message of hope. Every week I've been opening my messages by asking something akin to, how are you doing so far this week? And in my mind and in my heart, I've hoped you've been answering fine, or at least fine under the circumstances. But Brian Mayer points out something interesting in his recent article, During a Global Pandemic, You Aren't Fine. Be honest. Mayer makes the argument that to say you're fine implies that you're well adjusted. He then goes on to quote the 20th century sage Jiddu Krishnamurti, who wrote, "It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society." Mayer argues that a person should not feel well adjusted in an abusive relationship or a spiritually abusive religion. A person should not feel well adjusted if minorities are hunted. A person should not feel well adjusted to consumerism. A person should not feel well adjusted during a global pandemic. And he's right. Abuse, racism, consumerism, and global pandemics should not make us feel fine. The question that begs to be answered is, should we ever be well adjusted to a sick society at all? Maybe 8 to 10 weeks ago, I would have said that I was fine. But back then, I was working every day at the church. Preparations were underway to celebrate Easter. Sue and I were planning a summer or perhaps a fall vacation. But then COVID-19 slapped the world across the face. And over the weeks, when I've been saying I'm fine, what I've really been saying is I'm pandemic fine. Like you perhaps, I have been far from fine. Routines have been disrupted and vacation plans canceled. Sue and I are on what seems will be a permanent staycation. It's driving me nuts. I don't know how many more people will die in Windsor and around the world. I don't know if I'll ever see my mother again, alive. She's 86 years old and living way out in a nursing home in BC. It's a global pandemic and I'm feeling anxious. At best, I'm doing okay under the circumstances. But if I'm being honest, there are moments when I'm scared. And being scared is unpleasant. All the uncertainty scares me, and I'm probably not that well adjusted to the experience. And whenever I get feeling this way, my natural inclination is to ask myself who or what is causing all this. In the case of this pandemic, my mind all of a sudden races to God as the ultimate cause of my fear and anxiety. And finding myself there, my mind then races to the book of Exodus as evidence of God's tendency to punish. It races to God's plague of blood perpetrated on Pharaoh, to God's plague of frogs and plague of gnats, to God's plague of flies, boils, hail, locusts, and darkness, and ultimately to God's plague on the firstborn. I am left pondering whether some of the current ills in the world have been sent directly by God. The droughts, the floods, and the warming of the planet. The smog, polluted water, locusts, and COVID-19 pandemic. And then, as if I have any other choice, my mind races across the entirety of the biblical text to the book of Revelation. And I'm left pondering the 7 plagues, the 7 bowls of God's wrath, the fall of empire, the horsemen, and the blood. All are terrifying images of God's punishment of sinful humankind. All of them paint a vivid image of a bloodthirsty, vengeful God, the complete antithesis of the God Jesus described as love and compassion. And it's right there, precisely at that point, that my mind halts its frantic race toward despair. for I refuse to go there. I remind myself that that is not the God I have come to know. That is not the God I would ever choose to worship and love, let alone lay down my life. In the confluence of a few seconds, I purposely choose instead to love and serve the God who meets us and loves us in our most vulnerable places, as Martin Luther put it. I choose instead to place my hope in a God who loves us especially in those places where we need the most love. Modern-day droughts, floods, and the warming of the planet, smog, polluted water, locusts, and pandemic, these are not punishments perpetrated by God on humankind. To the contrary, many, if not most of these, are man-caused. With man behaving badly, biology and chemistry simply follow in and run their course. The principles of cause and effect rule the day. I can only think that humankind is the perpetrator of mayhem, and God is but a concerned spectator. Still, God is a concerned spectator who is willing to act. I am convinced that God, as love, is with the many doctors and nurses standing in a hallway, cheering a patient who has just come off the ventilator and is ready to return home. God is in the grocery cashier's smile, flashed from behind a plexiglass divider. God is seen in two hands separated by glass as daughter greets mother at a nursing home. God is seen everywhere love is shared or simply given away. That's my God. And these are but a few examples of the many places God can be found. So I have to tell you, I'm feeling better now. I suppose that in writing this message, it became a message of hope directed at me. My mind is now at rest. Its bitter race has come to an end. Once again, I'm filled with hope for a bright future. I can rise to meet another week. And I certainly hope you feel the same. So until next week, be well and be kind. Stay safe and keep faith and hope alive. Peace.